What is going on, everybody? It's Alex coming back at you with another video. And today we have a special guest for our mock draft. Devin, feel free to introduce yourself.
Yeah, Devin Jackson, work with the Philadelphia Inquirer. Been covering the NFL draft. This will be, I believe, my fourth full cycle. So excited to follow it once again, and excited to do his mock draft. I haven't done one yet for the 2024 class. I've been, trying to stay on top of some of the top prospects and who's rising, who's falling. Who could be some surprise first rounders and trying to keep up with it all. So excited to be here, and thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you guys do not already follow Devin over on Twitter, that is where I found him. He's been posting a ton of NFL draft content over there. And again, I always appreciate a fellow draft lover. And every single time I end up writing a name down, it's like Patrick Payton, for example. I see a clip today where Devin's posting it. So it's great where those of y'all who don't have access to all 22 can get some really good clips and also see a lot of the gems that we cannot always mention. So, Devin, appreciate you for that. But you want to go first or you want to go second? We're going to be going back to back. So you want evens or odds?
I'll go with evens this time.
You go with evens. You're leaving me with the Cardinals first pick. I see your strategy. I see your strategy. So kicking this off, I am going to leave you to deal with the Bears fans and their hatred for letting go of Justin Fields because with this first pick, Kyler Murray, well, again, this is the current draft order, so I don't think it'll actually end up being like this. I know you do a lot of betting content as well, so those of y'all who like the betting content, feel free to go over and look at a lot of Devin's work. Feel free to pick his brain there. I still, if they're going to be here, are going to select Marvin Harrison Jr. I think the talent of Kyler Murray is too damn good. Contract is too damn expensive, and Marvin Harrison Jr. is just too damn good to pass on. So overall, just one of those can't miss prospects, my number two player on my board. But for the Cardinals, who already have a quarterback, don't complicate things. Get somebody who's going to be a proven impact.
Also, kind of from that aspect, it would be kind of insane to have Kyler Murray in. Um, I don't think this is a comp, but like you kind of getting the similar skill set with Caleb Williams.
Sure,
Like you're getting kind of a bigger Kyler Murray, if so to speak. If you're gonna pick Caleb Williams at one, if you're Arizona, so it's like, is that really a move that you need to make? So it's going to be an interesting and fascinating decision because I mean, we could have another scenario where maybe the number one pick decides to trade down a few spots.
that's
Maybe
true.
someone wants to come up and get a quarterback, like the Panthers did this past cycle. So that might be something to keep in mind,
Yeah,
keep in mind. But I don't hate the Marvin Harrison pick, but it does make my job a little harder with the Bears at two.
indeed.
Marvin Harrison is not on the board. Look, I think they should keep looking at Justin Fields and keep seeing what they have with them. Obviously, the team around him just is not complimentary of his skill set, and him getting hurt just complicates things a little bit more. Plus, they have the second and third pick here. So I'm gonna go Olufushanu. They
Nice.
need to upgrade their offensive line. Look, you got to take the best offensive lineman available here, and I think that's him. And see where your chips fall for three. I know this is going to probably be interesting to see neither Drake May nor Caleb Williams go one or two, but
Mm,
based on where these teams are in the investments they have in the quarterback, it's kind of hard to see them taking one at this point of the season.
that's very true. So I'm curious what you think about teams that could trade up to number one. I know you definitely mentioned that. I've had quite a few teams. I've had the idea of even moving New York based on the fact they're at number four right now, up to number one. I've had the Broncos potentially move up to number one. They're not shy with spending first round picks. But there's just seems to be a lot of teams that, they used to be a lot of teams that were within striking range of that number one spot. But the longer the draft has progressed, a lot of these teams in the top 10 already have their quarterbacks. Who do you think could be a good target for one?
I mean, Vikings have to be in that conversation, right? Especially
Yeah.
with the Kirk Cousins injury.
Yeah.
So I would say they certainly come to mind, when you're thinking about teams that could trade up. right now it's not looking good, but just based on their schedule, they're gonna have an inexperienced quarterback or someone that's not really a needle mover, replacing Kirk Cousins.
Mhm.
So you have to think they're gonna shoot back up the board, as the season progresses.
Yeah.
But especially with Justin Jefferson out as well, and you would have to think that they're not gonna rush him back to get back either.
Oh yeah.
So I would think they come to mind. The Giants, like you said,
Mhm.
certainly come to mind. Um, I mean, maybe monitor the Rams situation right now
Yep.
because Stafford is also injured, and
Mhm.
um, they're just not a good football team. And we knew that going into the season, right?
Yeah.
But it's just unfolded very negatively, for them, and
Mhm.
they've lost some winnable games, and it just is starting to trend in that direction for them. So those are the
Surely.
first ones that come to mind.
Mhm.
See Green Bay at 6. I don't know if they're ready to make that investment yet. It's a tough conversation to have because their offense is so young and so inexperienced. It's hard to judge
Mhm.
to see if Jordan Love is going to be the answer for them. But I mean, if things continue to go the way they are, it'll be pretty hard for them not to at least consider it. So
Sure.
those are the teams I see. Patriots as well, possibly, but they're
It's
just not
still
known for making those things.
yeah.
Making those type of decisions. So I think to me, it probably comes down to the Giants and Vikings as things currently sit. And look, I understand you had a big investment in Daniel Jones, but
Yeah.
it's time to move on.
It's time. It's time. Speaking of time, it's time for me to make the third overall pick before we can start talking about the Giants here. I am very tempted to still go Caleb Williams, but I'm gonna continue your thought process that the Bears are going to continue with Justin Fields. And let's assume that Caleb Williams explicitly says, I'm not playing for the Bears. They're not gonna give me ownership. I don't want to play for them. Not gonna play for them. So that's the assumption I'm gonna make. Drake May could be fun to go after, but again, we're continuing with the logic that, essentially we're keeping Justin Fields for the future. A great weapon, Brock Bowers. I know Cole Kmet's there. That's a great, great, solid weapon for you to have. Not necessarily an elite weapon, let's put it that way. But Darnell Mooney's up for a contract. You have DJ Moore, Velez Jones. Let's not even get started on that. But Brock Bowers, more importantly, is so versatile. I don't even have a list as a tight end. One, he blocks better than any tight end that I've seen in recent memory for his size. He's a great blocker, but great after the catch, and he can run routes as well as a wide receiver can. I'm praying to God it's not a Kyle Pitts situation where we know the talent's there and it just doesn't get utilized. But Brock Bowers seems to be a weapon that I would not bet on seeing for a very long time. And when I don't know if I'm going to be seeing a weapon for a very long time, I want that on my team. So Brock Bowers, you can move him anywhere on the whole entire, whether it's a slot, boundary, keep him at tight end, do whatever you want, but just make sure that he's on your roster.
If I'm the Giants, I'm running this card in. Doesn't matter if it's Drake May or Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
You get both of them a pick at 4. You got to go with it. But I'm gonna go with Caleb Williams here for the Giants. I just think him being paired with Brian Dabble would certainly be interesting. Play action would be exciting to see with them. And also it gives obviously the dynamic running ability next to Saquon Barkley, but he is a distributor. He's going to get the ball to those weapons, even though he might dance around there a little bit in the backfield. I think the way that they're trending, they have to have someone that is a difference maker. Like
Mhm.
Daniel Jones, when things are going well, he can play well enough for you to stay in games. But when it comes down to you got to have those special plays being made, and they're not being made at quarterback right now for the Giants. And I think it's time to move on from Daniel Jones, and I think Caleb Williams fits the bill.
Could not agree more. For pick number 5, I am actually going to rush this card in. Very rare that we'll see the Patriots in a position to draft a star quarterback. Does it potentially lead to something that doesn't work in a Bill O'Brien system? I don't know, but I'm willing to bet on Drake May as somebody who at least is worth taking a shot on if he's sitting there at 5. Great mobility, great arm talent. The kid's been a natural leader since he came in. Just overall, one of the more special talents that we have seen coming out. It's I don't like the inconsistency, but the high level play is worth taking a shot on and then develop the weapons around him because he is a foundational piece of a franchise. The question is he going to be consistent enough to be reliable down the stretch? That's the question that you have to ask yourself.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, these guys going 4 and 5,
Mm,
I could see either of these teams trading up to get them. So
yeah.
I don't want people to get too, fixated on the fact that they're going 4 and 5. It's more about team fits, right? And
Yep.
what they can do and what they would look in these systems. So wanted to kind of put that disclaimer out there.
Yep.
Packers at 6 is an interesting one. We kind of briefly talked about what could they do? What are some of their scenarios? Could they be looking at quarterback? Ultimately, they don't, but I do think they have to upgrade the offensive line.
Mm,
It's been a big issue this year. You look across the offensive line. I mean, Zach Tom at right tackle has been a gem, and he's been a
yeah.
great hit for them. Otherwise, it's been a real struggle. So you take the best offensive lineman available on the board right now. I would take Joe Alt here. I do think J.C. Latham will be an interesting,
Mm,
case to take a closer look at. I think he's played really well this year, and I do think he has the tools to potentially make a move to left tackle. I know he's playing right tackle at Bama, and kind of surprised they didn't move him over to left tackle this year. But I'm gonna go with Joe Alt here. I think he fits what they're looking for. Technician, really sound at the point of attack, and really young to be as good as he is at tackle.
definitely. For me, I love the Joe Alt pick. Again, if you're not going to be going after a quarterback, it's one of the positions you just at least need to give serious thought about. David Bakhtiari has been a cornerstone there for, I mean, damn near the past decade. So you kind of been, I mean, people talk about how it's not a big issue because they continue sniping linemen down the board. But the one key guy on that line has been Bakhtiari when healthy. But of course, the one consistency is the fact he hasn't been very healthy. Joe Alt so far has been relatively reliable and hopefully can continue to do so. About JC Latham, I'm curious if you see this. I surprisingly, it doesn't look like it, played offensive line for 7 years. And I have a tendency to have a very negative outlook on players that don't finish through the whistle. Something I saw with both JC Latham and Tyler Guyton this year and last year is their willingness to give up blocking on their rep before the whistle's done. And I'm curious if you've seen that, but more importantly, if you do see that in certain players, do you really think that's as big of a negative as maybe me, for example, where like if I have a player within 10 spots of each other on the board, I'm obviously going to take even the lower player if they don't have that potential concern.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something to certainly make a note of. I don't
Mhm.
think it's a I guess a critical thing to negate, but I do
Yeah.
think it's worth noting because you just kind of never know if the play is really done. So
Mm.
like that block, that half second, second that you let go, it can open up a
Yeah.
chance for a tackle to be made. So I think it's something that certainly can be coached up a little bit more in terms of like, hey, you know, just try and sustain this a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And and if it keeps popping up, certainly it can be a negative. But I think overall, you're looking at something that, if it's very noticeable where they're giving up tackles because of it, absolutely. But if it's one of
Mm.
those things where maybe their backside on the play or the play goes away from them, they kind of let go, it's something I think, you got to break the habit, obviously, because they're just kind of used to it hitting it as, the play hidden in a certain way. So I
Definitely.
think it really is a case by case situation. But, um,
Sure.
with those two guys, I don't see it as a huge issue. I think Guyton in general needs to improve his run blocking in general. So I think it just kind of goes hand in hand. But
Hmm.
with Latham, with how nasty he can be at times, I think, you just want to always see that same effort every time.
Definitely. I do think there is a talent gap between Latham and Guyton at the moment for sure. I just saw both of them. Sometimes they just don't finish the rep. And I do think that I obviously would take a bet on Latham well before Guyton at this point. But it was just a trait that I saw a couple times between the both of them, and it was like, for me, maybe a little bit uncomfortable. But at number 7, I'm gonna go Kool-Aid McKinstry here. I think that with Anthony Richardson returning, you do have some concerns as to whether Michael Pittman Jr. will want to return. I assume so. He bought 22 acres of land. Of course, you can always sell your real estate, but that's a topic for another day. I'm going to assume that he returns. So I'm hoping Alec Pierce can eventually burst out. Josh Downs looks like a beast. And then, the offensive line, right now, the choices for me are not worth passing up on an elite defensive back like Kool-Aid McKinstry. He has the physicality that Juju Brents also has, and it's a good position to target regardless. You can never go wrong with going after a top-tier corner, and overall, I just think he is the best corner that is on the board.
Yeah, those disagreements there for me. I think he certainly has lived up to what you expect of him. I know some people had Kalen King maybe ahead of him preseason or during the season, and
Yeah,
it just kind of sucks for Kalen King. Kind of go on a rant here, just because they haven't played any quality receivers until Marvin Harrison Jr. So you really didn't get to
sure.
see him do much. And then when you did, you're going against one of the best, just the best receiver in college football, and
Yeah.
just not in a great situation. So I think he has a really nice chance to kind of, I don't want to say he lost stock, but I think his stock kind of just cooled a little bit in terms of going high first round. I think he's still a first round talent, but I think his game against Michigan is going to be a big determining factor in
Oh, yeah.
just how high he goes. So we'll
Hmm.
certainly have to watch that game. But yeah, Kool Aid McKinstry has been fantastic. Look, I know, uh, Texas game was a little bit rough, but I do think overall the tape is been really consistent, even going back to last year. But he has a big matchup this weekend as well, going against Malik Neighbors in that LSU receiving corps. So, very, very
Big
fascinated
test.
to see that for sure. With eight
Yeah.
with the Broncos, look, you miss out on, potentially two quarterbacks. I would consider JJ McCarthy here for the Broncos. Look, I know Russell Wilson is that contract is going to be hard to get out of, but I do think you
Yeah.
have to start looking towards the future. But there's also Keon Coleman on the board, and look, Portland Sutton just hasn't played at the same level. Jerry Judy is kind of up and down with that every week. So it's kind of hard to pick between two. I'm gonna go with McCarthy here. Uh, I think
Ooh.
he I think he's played really well enough, and then you kind of envision him operating, Sean Payton's system, and that could be an exciting pairing. I think those two
Yeah.
can mesh really well. The play action is already a big part of Michigan's attack. The quick game, he's operating at the high level, which Sean Payton loves to do. So I might be my favorite pick thus far, McCarthy
Yeah.
to the Broncos.
No, McCarthy. So for me, he doesn't make it past the Falcons by any stretch of the imagination. I think that he's honestly a better version. I think he's what people thought Desmond Ritter was coming out, but just better in every category. He's really still a pretty quality runner. He has the big time throw ability. He has much better ball placement. I think he's improved significantly even over last year with just the consistency. You could see he had the it factor last year, and there were those big plays. Obviously, he beat Ohio State again, which I'm an Ohio State fan, but give credit where credit's due. He's just been so much better. And even like a week ago, 6 big time throws, 0 turnover worthy plays. That was something I wouldn't expect this early on from McCarthy. I thought he was maybe 2 years out. It looks like he's taken an extra year of development over the offseason. But I picked number 9. For the record, I actually had Kalen King and Kool-Aid McKinstry right next to each other. I'm a big Penn State fan for some reason. Again, I'm an Ohio State fan, but ended up falling in love with Penn State players. But regardless, yeah, I think that what you're talking about with Marvin Harrison Jr., it's pretty tough to go up against arguably the best receiving talent of all time and then lose. So in games where it's pretty obvious that even though Kalen King could be a first round quality, if not top 10 player in the draft, you do see when they do go up against someone who is significantly better. I like to look at how they lose. Do they remain in a good position when they lose? If yes, then that's a win in my opinion. Tyson Campbell was that guy for me. Joey Porter at points was that guy for me. Kalen King's still that type of guy for me. So he's still he's my number 11 player in the class even now. And I'm debating taking him here because I don't know if I want to take a quarterback at this point. And I do know this team is just the Rams know how to invest down the board. We saw in this past draft, and they're having a lot of picks that are day 3 picks that are starting to make a real impact. And that was something I didn't expect this early on. I actually had the Rams winning 1 game this year because I just didn't believe that they'd be able to hit the ground running the way they could. Puka Nakua helps. But man, I mean, at this point, given the depth of the positions on the board, I am actually going to go Kalen King. He didn't win versus someone who's going to be in his own division here in Marvin Harrison Jr. back-to-back years. But he does lose better than most corners that I've ever seen go up against Marvin Harrison Jr. And it's better to lose well than to win once in a while. So I'm going to go Kalen King here.
Yeah, I think they have to address the corner position. Look, they have their current corners have certainly, I think, played or even outplayed their draft position. Like Kobe Durant
Kobe Durant.
has played really
Durant.
well. Yeah, he plays he's played really well. You know, they've had their corners play well in spots, but you gotta inject some talent in that room. You know, after losing Jalen Ramsey, you know, it just has not been replaced yet, and they kind of need that guy, especially going up against the receivers they go up against in the NFC West.
Yeah.
Um, 10 here, I saw the Commanders in person here, and man, they went to Logan Thomas a lot. You know,
Mhm.
for someone that's not as dynamic as an athlete as you expect to see that volume of target, they clearly want to throw to their tight ends, but obviously, Brock Bowers would be the perfect pick here, but he's off the board. I don't think there's a tight end that's even close in that first round discussion. If you can do me a favor, you can go to the edge position because I think
Good
they should
choice.
go
Yeah.
edge here. I'm gonna go with Liate Latu. I think
Ooh.
it just makes sense. Montez Sweat might be on the way out for Washington. Chase Young is still a question mark. And Latu has been dominant, man. He's been dominant. Just watched the Colorado game last night, and he was in the backfield so much in that game.
Yeah.
I think I saw Shador Sanders got hit like 20 times or something like that, 17 times in that game.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Um, look, I understand Colorado's offensive line is bad, but he has even against great competition against Oregon State, he was fantastic. A couple of weeks ago against Stanford, he was great. So he's stacking really good performances even against top tier competition. I just want people to realize like sure they're playing some of the down teams in the Pac-12 or not as talented offensive lines, but you'll see it against USC. He's going to be all in Caleb Williams face all game. You know, it's going to be something that you'll see over the course of the season, especially when they get another primetime game, big time game. I think people will realize just how good he is. So I
Yeah.
think this is a slam dunk pick here for the Commanders. I know they run a 4-3, so it's not technically like you would kind of like to see maybe Latu in as an outside backer potentially, but I think
Mhm.
you got to get a really good player in the building, and I think he met meshes with what they want in a pass rusher.
Yeah, I mean, he also has that size profile that you're looking for. He is extremely athletic, great arm length. He knows how to use. He's very smart as a technician. I'm still waiting. I want to watch him a bit more. I'm not fully sold on his ability that he has right now to translate to the NFL at that rate. I think he'll translate perfectly fine. I think he'll be a quality edge rusher. But, guys versus guys like, the Colorado or University of Boulder, um, those tackles not necessarily going to be the most translatable reps in my opinion, even though should produce well, and he did very well. He's done a great job regardless. My big test for both him as well as my number 3 player in the class, Taliese Fuaga, was that game versus Oregon State. Both of them did very well respectively. So for me, I gained a lot more respect for Latu then. That's why I've included him very highly in some of my mock drafts now. But I'm still not fully sold because he's such a finesse rusher. He uses so much skill. And I want to see a little bit more of the consistent leg drive because these tackles in the NFL, very smart. They're not always going to be fooled by your technique. So sometimes I like a little bit more physicality. That's my only pushback on Latu. But, the talent's all there. Fits Washington perfectly. So cannot get mad at that pick whatsoever. For the Cardinals, though, I think that normally I've taken a corner by this point for the Cardinals. I don't think there is one that is worth it. I like Cooper DeJean as a safety slash slot hybrid slash special teamer slash put him anywhere, honestly. But I don't really trust that he'd be used properly in a Gannon system unless you want to use him in slot, which at pick number 11, I don't think is worth it. I'm going to go after someone with extremely high upside, and it's a position where they're kind of dying for some infusion of talent, and that's defensive interior. Jerzon Newton has just been on a tear. Granted, it's kind of been a roller coaster between 8 pressures and 2 per game, but regardless, he's going to get through to the backfield. He's become a significantly better run stuffer this past year than he has been in any year prior. Just overall, one of the best block shedders I've ever seen. Similar to Latu, he has a ton of skill with his hands, and he just knows how to get off blocks. So, just kind of the defensive interior version of Latu in this class. Great athlete, great block shedder, and it's a big position of need. Okay, so Jerzon Newton, pick at number 11. Want your thoughts really quickly on that because it's pretty high for a defensive interior player, but at the same time, it's Jerzon Newton.
Yeah, I think about that's about the range he would probably go, just
Mhm.
theoretically, I think pretty much after 10, really in that teen area, like, 11 to 16, 17, I think makes a lot of sense. I mean, you didn't pick him there. I was going to pick him for the Raiders because he's such a Raiders pick.
Yeah.
He just kind of fits their MO. But you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong with that. Um, Now as it relates to the Raiders, it's a tough one because like I think McCarthy go there in a lot of mocks, but I don't know
Mhm.
if that really fits. I mean, you still got Keon Coleman there, but I mean, you have a pretty good receiving core already with
Sure.
Kobe Myers and Devontae Adams.
Mhm.
So I think defense would certainly be the pick here. I think see running back pop up a lot of these teams, but running back is probably not going to be like a late second round, early third round,
Mhm.
run because there's just really no standouts. But just based on my gut, man, I'm gonna go with Jared Verse. I
Ooh.
just think he is what they will be looking for in that type of edge rusher. You possibly play outside backer as well, but I think
Mhm.
you can never have too many premium edge rushers, and I think especially everything that's happened with like Chandler Jones, over the course of the year with the Raiders, they're really missing
Yeah.
that void. So
Yeah.
I really like Jared Verse here. I think he fits a need, and he just feel like embodies what you would think of in terms of what an edge rusher would look like that the Raiders would pick.
Mm.
Just very, very violent with his hands. Uh, really tries to use his strength at the point of attack to get off blocks. And
Sure.
sometimes that kind of backfires against him. He doesn't have quite the stats you expect of a guy that coming back, after being considered one of the best edge prospects in entering last year's draft.
Mhm.
But I think he's starting to heat up, and he's starting to play exactly where we thought he would. I had a really good game against Wake Forest. Had a really good game against Duke as well. A nice battle with Graham Barden. So I think he's really trending in the right direction. And for a guy we thought was going to go top five, maybe even top 10 entering the year, I think you're getting a little bit of value here. And honestly, it kinda makes me think, like, I feel like I'm never high on Florida State senior edge rushers,
Mm.
because even with Jermaine Johnson, I wasn't super high on him. I think I had him as a 5th edge guy, ranked in his class,
Yep.
when I think back to it, and I don't know what it is, but it just seems like you see the draft eligible tape and it's really, really good, dominant, and then kind of sets that high bar for their last season. Um, and I kind of it kind of happens, even with Will Anderson last year, it was kind of the same thing. People were expecting even better than he did, his breakout season. He still played really well and obviously went top three, but there's something to be said, I guess, about the edge rusher hype. Are they meeting those expectations? And maybe they're set way too high. But I think he still can play himself into the top 10. But getting him at 12 here, I think is a pretty good bargain.
Yeah, no, big fan of that. Obviously with the Raiders, you can't really go wrong with the pick at this point. So, like every single position is a damn near need. It's intriguing to see how Verse, Tyree Wilson, Max Crosby are going to play together. We'll see if if Max Crosby could potentially be used in the future as trade capital because he's just so damn good. And honestly, just deep down inside, I have that personal desire for him to go to a potential Super Bowl candidate, but that's a topic for another day when shit starts really hitting the fan for this organization, even though it kind of already has. At pick number 13, there's a lot of routes I could go. I think Keon Coleman would be a pretty damn awesome replacement for in the long run for Mike Evans. However, I feel like this team still has one good year left with their veterans. And given the fact I love Baker with all my heart, don't get me wrong with that. I feel like the one area that could really push this team above all other competition in their own division is going to be a quarterback. And Bo Nix has the game managing ability of Baker Mayfield, a little bit more of that mobility, even though Baker has shown the ability to run. Bo Nix is a little bit better of an athlete, cheaper contract for the long run. If you want to sign Baker to a longer contract, going to be a bit more expensive. And Bo Nix is just shown to be electric. He's learned year over year. We can kind of give him a pass for how he played at Auburn because that whole entire system was complete garbage. But he's just done better and better and better. Not very pressured, or he's not pressured very often, but that's because Oregon also knows how to develop an offensive line. Luckily, Tristan Wirfs is going to be his blindside tackle. So he won't really have to deal with too many issues there. Only other guy I'd like to mention in this category is Michael Penix. He takes a pretty damn good advantage of his receiving core. He's been pretty much blessed with an elite left tackle, an elite receiving core, and just a very solid O line. So Michael Penix has dealt with some of the same benefits that Bo Nix has and has done a great job regardless. I don't think you can really be mad at either selection. I'm going to take the higher upside of the mobility and the lower injury rate in terms of season ending injury with Bo Nix here, though.
Yeah, I certainly can see the path, and I was just thinking, I think yesterday or the day before that, I think the third quarterback will probably come in the teens.
Mhm.
Just based on like, all right, we know those two guys are going early, I think over the leading up to the draft over the past couple years, we talked about, okay, where does that third quarterback come out? Where does the second quarterback come? So it's like we're always looking for, okay, we know there's two guys in a tier of their own. All right, when does the next one come? Right.
Mhm.
And I think we had gotten after we saw those 5 quarterbacks go in the first round a couple years ago, we were just like, "All right, this is how it's gonna be. This is how the NFL thinks now." But over the last 2 cycles, we've seen the quarterback the teams wait out on a quarterback, right? Like, Desmond Ritter didn't get picked to the 3rd round. Malik Willis didn't get picked to the 3rd round. And then even thinking back to Justin Fields, he didn't go until what, 11? So, there's no guarantee that that third quarterback is going to come in the top 10. Someone's going to tray out in the top 10. So I think that's a, kind of great logic to think about, with how quarterbacks go. So seemingly go off the board quickly, teams are probably going to wait, especially if we don't get May or Williams, when does that next one come off? And I think really
Yeah.
between, depending on where the teams fall, but between that 12 to 14, 15, teams in the 20s might feel a little bit more comfortable doing that than trading it all the way up into the top 10, top five. So
Sure.
I think it's an extra interesting point to make.
Hmm.
14. All right. Got the Chargers here. Um, just based on who's available, I mean, Keon Coleman would be another great addition to core that already had Quinn Johnston, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams is on IR, but I'm gonna go a different route here. I'm gonna go with offensive line. I'm gonna go with JC Latham
Respect it.
for the Chargers. And I think they just have to shore up the right side of that line. The left side with Ron Slater, Zion Johnson, fantastic. They do a great job protecting Herbert, but Herbert's your long-term investment. You got to continue to build that offensive line to be really good, and become one of the top units in the NFL. And I think taking Latham with the right tackle experience, how well he's protected this year, and a really good edge class from the SEC. that will obviously get tested again with LSU this weekend.
Yeah.
I think, it it just makes sense. You go tackle here, you shore up the right side of that line, and you prosper, and you continue to build around your franchise quarterback.
Man, I've been crying for the Chargers to get a right tackle for damn near the past half decade. So believe me, I'm fully on board with that. Pick number 15 for the Titans. There's a couple routes I could see them going. Defensive back is always going to be valuable, but this class does have quite a few guys down the board that I think could be extremely valuable. I know that I'm pretty sure Christian Fulton's up for a contract, so there's also a need there at boundary, but I think the next guy I would take as a pure boundary would be Denzel Burke. It's a bit rich for me. It's a bit rich for me right now. With the emergence and hopefully consistency of Will Levis, hopefully he will be the consistent starter for the long run. He's shown the desire to throw it down the field, and Traylon Burks. I would love for him to resort back to a pure slot role, even though I love Kyle Phillips and everything he can do. I want someone who has a unique aggressive catchability because DeAndre Hopkins is not getting any younger. He's still going to be a great weapon for the next year or two. But something is just so exciting about the idea of Levis just saying, screw it, I'm going to throw a deep ball to Keon Coleman and seeing how Keon Coleman can just absolutely eviscerate a secondary. It's going to be fun to see. I don't think it's the biggest need by any stretch, but sometimes it's okay to spoil your quarterback with somebody who could be a true difference maker at the next level.
For sure, I completely agree there, and I think um, you can never have too many weapons. Traylon Burks is still coming along in his development.
Mhm,
And look, Nick Westbrook, Kenny, he has done really, really well for the
mhm,
Titans. But I think you have DeAndre Hopkins. You want to keep pushing your chips forward, and the Titans are never sellers in any sense of it. And if you're picking here, upgrading at receiver with Keon Coleman, who probably could go top 10.
mhm.
Just the way the board fell, obviously, just didn't work out that way. But certainly, I think it's certainly warranted.
Yeah.
All right, the Saints here at 16. This is a tough roster to figure out, right? Because
Mhm,
like you have to think if things continue to go south, like are they going to start offloading contracts? Are they going to start maybe
mhm,
looking at trade options? Um, and you look at their secondary in particular at corner, they put in some resources there. They got Paulson Adebo, they got Alante Taylor, so they're looking at guys there that certainly could be cornerstone guys.
mhm.
But I look at another position that I think could use an upgrade here in the near future. I think Tyron Matthews kind of reaching that point where he's starting to decline a little bit. And I
Mhm.
think Cooper DeJean here could make a lot of sense. And the fact that I think I've seen some things of projecting him at safety, seen some
Mhm.
things of him being more of a kind of, I won't say chess piece, but a move piece along secondary. And I think
Yeah.
you just get someone that talented, obviously at special teams upside as well. You get someone that talented and you find a role for him. And I
Mhm.
think the Saints, especially what they've done in the secondary and the different looks they can bring to you. I think they will love to have a guy like that. And I just look at it with the rest of the board, the defensive line class, really after Jerzon Newton isn't robust, especially at that level. And then you look at their they put in capital in the edge rushers too. Peyton
Mhm.
Turner. I know they just got Brian Brsay as well.
Mhm.
So I didn't want to go that route. I think this is going to be a team that you have to wait until after the season to really hone in and know what they're going to do, because then you'll
Sure.
know if they're going to trade off some assets, put some people on the trade block, release some players. But I think right now I would feel comfortable taking them. I wouldn't count them out looking at offensive line either, just because Trevor Penning hasn't worked out at left tackle this far. So
Yeah.
uh, but I think Cooper DeJean there, to me, just kind of with the vision of maybe he plays safety, maybe you move him around the secondary, I think. just entices me enough to take him there.
I totally agree. I mean, I have if you're going to use Cooper as a pure corner, I definitely wouldn't take him in the first round. I don't feel like his ability to change directions the way that a corner changes directions, I don't feel like it's fluid enough. But when it comes to him being in the slot, when it comes to him being a safety, I don't really see very many being better than him, even in the NFL. He just has that downhill speed ability. He's super smart. And the range or the mobility you need to be a top tier safety doesn't have as much of the quick twitch fibers that maybe a corner does when they're guarding someone like Garrett Wilson, for example. And when you get to see Cooper be in that type of role as a safety or as a pure slot, which they don't need because Alontae Taylor's a beast, but that's just something that you're going to build a cornerstone piece on your team. You just need to find a place for him, and that's exactly the move that I would probably make at that point. For pick number 17 on the Jets, wide receivers intriguing option. Like besides Garrett Wilson, they don't necessarily have an elite weapon. However, I think that right tackle spot needs to get fixed. I mean, Kayvon Thibodeau, who actually went to my high school, so shout out Oaks Christian. He went off 3 sacks. He's just been on a tear. I think he's number 3 in the NFL right now in terms of sacks overall because of that game. And Max Mitchell, not going to be the long term option at right tackle for me. AVT, not going to be the guy who I want to play at right tackle either. So I'm going to go my number 3 player in the class, Talise Fuaga. He's just been absolutely dominant game in, game out. One of those guys who, when I first watched him, I just fell in love. He's a pancake machine, and he just developed week over week as in terms of his mechanics as a pass blocker. And he's gone up against the best of them, Jonah Ellis, the Washington State edge rushers, Leatu Latu, and the Murphy brothers. Like, he stood up to some really good talent this year, and he's been able to hold his own. So proud of Talise Fuaga. He's been an absolute baller, and glad to say that he's going to be protecting Aaron Rodgers for the next year or two.
Yeah, he's a guy that I think people are going to come around to probably later in the cycle,
Mm,
just because Oregon
Oregon State.
State is not at the top of people's watch list. But I'll tell you what, I tune into Oregon State film every week because I love watching their run game. I think
Mm.
it's fascinating to see how they're able to mix it up between running stretch plays, outside zone, to being able to get Fuaga out on the edge on pull blocks. I think it's probably one of the best run blocking teams to watch, especially with two guys who at tackle that could be playing NFL next year. So they are so fun to watch, and I love Fuaga's game. And every time you're watching the backside zone, you see his guy just flying across the screen because he is stinging them past the hole and opening up that backside cut lane. So love watching him play, and certainly a very dynamic player. All right, Bengals here at 18. This one is tough. Just because like you look at the roster and the receiver position is stacked. Andre Yeshivas is playing really well. They had T. Higgins, obviously, Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd. Um, so they're pretty set. I look at along the offensive line, and it's tough to say with who's still on the board. If you see the tackles there, I don't know if there is a perfect fit for what they do, or any of these guys can come in right away and be immediate contributors. I think they're all a little bit um, developmental type of players. Like even Graham Barton, I think he's probably best suited at guard, most likely. Um, so it kind of makes it tough to say, should they pick him? Should they not? They put in some brought in Alex Kappa, obviously Cordell Volson is the starting left guard. And to me, I think right now is just so early to take a guard, someone at the guard position. They just picked Miles Murphy, so Chop Robinson there. I don't think would necessarily be the pick. Um, I mean, I even look at safety, and Dax Hill has been great. Cam Taylor Britt has been pretty good as well. Um, it just feels early to take Cameron Kitchens as well.
Mm,
Although he's a really good player, but I think for what he does, it's kind of early to take him. Um, see, yeah, let's just scroll down the board here. I would hate to just give them a guy just to give them one,
mm-hmm.
but I feel like they're at this point where, all right, are they gonna continue to invest in the offensive line that they kind of invested a lot of capital in already? Um, The edge group, I mean, maybe you add another edge guy there, but I mean, they got Sam Hubbard, Cam Sample, Miles Murphy, Trey
Mm,
Hendrickson, Joseph Asai. I mean, they have
they have
such a
good
stacked
stars.
defense.
Mm-hmm.
It's so good.
I'll
Me
pose this question to you. With Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins up for a contract, do you think they bring them both back?
mm,
Because that's expensive. That
yeah,
is a
I
pricey thing to do.
don't think so. Um, that I think that leaves room to take a receiver here, especially at
Mhm.
this point.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. I would probably take um probably Roma Dunze. I
Mm-hmm.
think right now, I think I like Malik Neighbors, but it's more likely they would probably keep Tyler Boyd on a cheaper contract than pay T. Higgins big money. So I'm gonna go Roma Dunze here. I think he can play opposite, obviously, of Jamar Chase. You can also move him around, which also made me think a little bit more about Malik Neighbors. But think he probably gut tells me Malik Neighbors probably goes in the same range Elijah Moore went in, just because like the
Mm.
size, and what he does after the catch.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if teams are there yet. I know they took Zay Flowers, who's kind of small,
Mm-hmm.
in the I won't say I guess mid-20s, but
Yeah.
even then, I think they're not taking them that early. So I think Roman Dunze there makes sense.
Sure. Plus, again, you brought it up. The price of the contract for T. Higgins is 25 minimum versus Tyler Boyd. It might be 10 to 15. It's a sizable difference, especially if you want to fill other holes, like potentially getting a veteran right tackle on a contract that could be 10 to 15 million dollars that could make the difference there. At pick number 19, I'm going to give a slight middle finger to you by saying you're not going to get Michael Penix for the Vikings. Um, I think that this team just needs a reset at quarterback. We saw how much more dynamic it was when Desmond Ritter was not the quarterback. I'm notoriously not super high on Desmond Ritter. I got to see him in person here destroy my SMU Mustangs over and over again, but still wasn't fully sold on him as an NFL quarterback. I think he's just too inconsistent, and unfortunately, I hate to be right on players I don't like, as like much as it qualifies me for when I don't like a player. But they haven't had consistency since essentially Matt Ryan was there. And granted, it's not too long ago, but Michael Penix could kind of bring back more of those days. And hopefully he'll actually use Kyle Pitts because it doesn't look like they're going to release him from prison anytime soon. So
Yeah.
pray for Arthur Smith.
Yeah, it's not a good situation. All right. You left me nothing at quarterback,
Yep.
which is fine. Look, I get it. It just especially with this class, it's like, okay, you gotta kind of pick and choose. But the caveat being like, look, Shador Sanders is still in there. His name is not out yet. So I'm going Shador Sanders here.
Ooh.
Just because I feel like him with Kevin O'Connell as a head coach would really, really be fascinating to see. Gets the ball out quick, makes decisive decisions, can maneuver the pocket. Look, Shador probably comes back, but in the small chance that he doesn't, I'm gonna give the Vikings a quarterback there and give him Shador Sanders because I think he fits what they're looking for. And honestly, there really wasn't much on the board that I could take. Maybe a Chop Robinson,
Yeah.
but Shador Sanders made sense there for me.
Definitely. I was going to say edge rusher or maybe a defensive back for them if it wasn't quarterback. Normally, when I do mock drafts, it's either Caleb Williams returns or Shadur. I don't know why I have to make that pretty much a bifurcation. It's like one returns or the other one does, but it makes sense if like since we're considering him still on the board, like it is a viable option. He is a starting quality quarterback by all metrics essentially, and this team is pretty damn desperate for that. They're kind of a quarterback away, and sometimes it's okay to stretch the budget a little bit in terms of the draft capital to get somebody who could bring this team to something great. For my Steelers here, there's a lot of positions I can go. I can get a starting strong safety here in Tyler Nubin, be perfectly happy. I think down the board, there's plenty of dudes who can honestly fit the role really well. I don't see the Steelers playing that game, whether it's Jaden Hicks, James Williams, Cole Bishop. Like, there's dudes who are down the board who are very talented at that position. Linebacker as well. Don't see any first round quality ones. Going to be definitely more the depth guys, but there's some good dudes in this class. There is, regardless of the criticism on them, there's enough depth, luckily, in this class to make up for the lack of top tier talent. I think the one guy who I'm excited to grab here, because Chakuma Okorafor irritates the living hell out of me, is Amarius Mims. You're going to pair him back up with his buddy who won the championship with him in Broderick Jones. Amarius, I mean, the Steelers are notorious for not giving reps to their first round rookies in the first place because the Steelers are going to Steeler. So he needs time to develop. He's going to get it anyways, whether he needs it or not. And then you have that synergy at the tackle spots for the next decade. So Amarius Mims, the selection there.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. And you know what? I hate it. I think you gotta fix the offensive line where you can.
Yeah.
If it's not working, it's time to upgrade.
Mhm.
Texans here at 22 is obviously got their pick from Cleveland. This is
Mhm.
an interesting one because this is a team that's ascending and really playing well under CJ Stroud. They have some really nice weapons at receiver. Nico Collins and
Mhm.
John Mechie is getting back in the groove. Tank Dell is finding some space. And even at tight end, I think they're pretty good at tight end. I mean, they got Dalton Schultz and I think Quinn Tarrant, yeah, Quinn
Quintoriano or something like that. Yeah.
Quatoriano, yeah, Tegan Quatoriano is
Yeah.
his full name. All right. So I'm gonna go defense here. I'm gonna look at corner because I think they
Ooh.
are an opposite corner away from being a really really good team. I think you might have to reach a little bit here at 22
Mhm.
to get a guy. But, with Derek Stingley, he's on IR right now, and what they have in Steven Nelson and, um, who's the other corner? Shaquille Griffin. I think
Yeah,
it's
Griffin.
time for a young, fresh upgrade.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna go with Nate Wiggins. I think he's
Ooh.
played really, really well early in the season. And honestly, I could have went him or Kamari Lassiter, who I think has really, really burst on the scene this year. But I really like Nate Wiggins' game and what he brings to the table. He played really well against Keon Coleman. Did some really nice things there.
Yeah.
Did get banged up a little bit, so you worry a little bit about that long term health. But I do think the corner has to be addressed here, and infusing Nate Wiggins there, I think makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. For the Niners, I am going to look at offensive line here. You still have some quality, high upside right tackles. I don't believe they would start right away, but Tyler Guyton does have the potential there. Luckily, well, unfortunately, his run blocking is one of the primary issues, and this team they love to run the ball. Kingsley Suamataia moved to left tackle this year, but he looked way more comfortable as a right tackle. Just for some reason, his overall mechanics haven't translated, in my opinion. Hence why he's here at 72 when he was almost a consensus first round quality or fringe first round player coming into the year. Graham Barton is the obvious easy selection because you can plug him at guard, you can plug him at tackle if he ends up remaining there. But as we've seen with guys like Evan Neal, it's not easy just to go left to right tackle. You're not going to get a one-to-one switch. Some guys don't really kick over to the other side too well. Luckily, Graham Barton also has center versatility. He went to Duke as a center. And I think having that Swiss Army knife mentality, similar to what we were talking about earlier with Cooper DeJean or Dijon, whatever, however the hell you pronounce it, you are going to be getting a cornerstone somewhere. So just find a role for him. They will be quality. Graham Barton's been a guy who I've been a fan of for a while now, and his athleticism is undeniable, and the fact that he's able to handle a guy like Jared Verse for an entire game, let up one pressure, is pretty damn phenomenal. So got to give him credit where credit is due. Graham Barton is the selection.
Yeah, he's really good, and honestly, this gets to a point, in the mock draft where you just take really good players,
Mhm.
and try to fit them, with scheme and try to uh, kind of forecast like, okay, obviously some guys that you maybe have wanted are off the board. Uh, how do we kind of transition now? And 49ers, they're always a stacked team, but the offensive line this year just has not played up to their
Mm,
what we're become accustomed to, and it's become more prevalent now that Brock Purdy is quarterback versus Jimmy Garoppolo. But the offensive line has really struggled this year, and he's been under a lot of duress, even though he's not playing well, and
mm,
certainly needs a need that needs to be filled. Bills here. I feel like every year it's like where all right, now where can you, find a hole in this roster? Um,
not many.
they have some, they have some young corners right now that are getting a lot of playing time, with Christian Benford, being one of them, and then, you know, Kyrie Elam really hasn't found, his stride. Tre'Davious White came back off an injury and, uh, got injured again. Uh, Relatively young linebacking core, but I don't know, man. Let's take a look at the linebackers and see, what we're working with. And honestly, I think it still might be too early to take one at this point. I think a lot of these guys are, day two, day three
Yeah.
type of players. I don't think you take one here in the first round. So I think I'm gonna pass on linebacker for now. Um, I look at their. It feels like every year they take an edge rusher, so I don't want to back into
Yeah.
that mindset. Um, so I'd say probably. I mean, they certainly need to upgrade at right tackle. I think that's undeniable for sure. But receiver, you could take a receiver here, and maybe think about upgrading tackle placements. But since they're both off the board, can we go back to tackles real quick?
Yeah.
Let's see. Um, I'm gonna go with a bit of reach here. I'm gonna go Tyler Guyton, and I think he has some time
Hmm.
to develop.
Yeah.
Uh, they're not really a team that relies heavily on the run game.
Hmm.
I know they want to make it more of their identity, but they just need a really talented pass protector, and I think he adds that ability, that skill set, that coaching. Bill Bendabaugh has been a great offensive line coach and has coached so many really, really good offensive tackles in the NFL currently.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go Tyler Guy, and I'm betting on traits. I'm betting on his upside, and betting on the time he'll have to develop properly.
Sure. Okay, so for the Lions, there's a couple positions I'd be open to targeting. There's a lot of really good players that are falling as well. That's just what happens in the draft. Good players fall, especially since we don't have trades. It's, not every team's going to be looking for an Emeka Ibuka, even though he's like top 15 on my board. Malik Neighbors is spectacular. And the edge rushers. I mean, I have multiple top 10 players who are still on the board. This is a team that could definitely use an upgrade at edge. There needs to be somebody more consistent across from Aiden Hutchinson. And to me, that's Dallas Turner. He also has coverage ability, which is awesome. He can kind of be that Houston upgrade, so to speak. So for me, Dallas Turner's just too good to pass on. You were talking about it earlier. Just get the right guys. Other players I would take at this point, Leonard Taylor is spectacular. Defensive interior is always a good target spot for them to go to. This defensive interior class, we talked about it. There's kind of like Drazon Newton, then there's a bit of a gap, and then you got your next players. I would say that's Leonard Taylor and Chris Jenkins, but that tier after that is not a significant gap the way that it's starting to appear that first gap is. So you can take your time when it comes to getting that second defensive interior cornerback. Again, we've talked about it. I'm open to taking one, but Denzel Burke and Dwight McLaughlin are my two dudes at this point. One, not going to give Lions fans PTSD of an Ohio State corner, but two, Dwight McLaughlin just doesn't realistically fit within this draft range. So as much as I like to give him credit, can't really think that. And then receiver, I don't really see an X-build receiver except Johnny Wilson. And I know I'm very exclusive on my opinion of Johnny Wilson, but I think he'd be a good compliment for this team. But Dallas Turner, I mean, hell, you can't go wrong with someone that's that versatile, can use speed to power, and just act like he's 260 pounds at 242.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Going that route, and I think we're gonna get a run of edge rushers here. I think I'm gonna go Chop Robinson with the Cowboys. I think when you look at their defensive ends, where they're what they have now. Obviously, you got the Marcus Lawrence. You have Dante Fowler, Dorrance Armstrong. Obviously you took Tyus, or you picked up Tyrus Wheat as a UDFA, selected Fahoko from San Jose State, but you can never have too many, and I think they love edge rushers. They love bringing in really talented guys. They can move around. Chop Robinson pairing up with Micah Parsons, rushing players on third down. I think it's just too good to pass up at this point. And plus, like I look at corner and I think they're okay. I think they're
Mm,
okay at corner. Deron Bland is playing at a really high level, replacing Trayvon Diggs. They still have Stephon Gilmore. Um, and ideally, you would like to see Deron Bland. Maybe he takes the other spot when Trayvon Diggs gets back.
yeah.
So I don't see a sense in infusing yet another guy in there. I thought about maybe you add another receiver to the mix, but I just don't see that them doing that. With what they have currently and investing money. But I do think Michael Gallup is probably gone after this year for sure.
Mm,
But I think just the way that they are structured right now, I think they want to continue adding to their defense.
all right. So for me, when I look at Chop Robinson, his evaluation is going to be solely post draft. I think that he has all the potential in the world to be a top 10 edge rusher in the NFL. You see the flashes every single game. The consistency is not always there. And I'm worried that if he goes to a particular franchise that's not great at developing or enhancing their edge rushers, we might lose out on one of the best talents. But giving a Penn State edge rusher to Micah Parsons to coach up and just mentor into probably another Micah Parsons, it's one of those picks where I'm not over the moon about going edge rusher for the Cowboys. This might be my exception because I think Chop could be just another version of Micah on a rookie contract before you have to pay Micah 30 plus million a year. And in a league where a salary cap exists, that's money well saved and that'll be money well spent that you can put onto Micah. So big fan of that pick. Probably the only edge rusher I would ever take for the Cowboys just from the pure upside. Now for the Jaguars, I am going to opt for a receiver here. I don't know if they're going to keep Calvin Ridley. So again, he's up for a contract. That's the big question of the year is, well, are they going to keep somebody who's had issues being consistent? And he hasn't proven to be a number one receiver anymore. As much as I love him, like, because I think he's one of the most fluid route runners I've ever seen. He kind of reminds me a lot of Amari Cooper in that way. Just hasn't lived up to the potential where he should be. And again, he just doesn't step up in those big moments consistently. That's the big issue with him. And for me, I'm always looking for a guy to be a wide receiver one. And I talked about it with the Lions, and I hate the fact that Emeka Buka is still on the board because I love him with all my heart. But he kind of fits in the slot as essentially a guy who's, unless you're having someone who's a designated slot, who's a bigger receiver than Emeka, you want him to be that guy who gets open to space, find the soft spot, and just absolutely eviscerate the defense that way. He's a spectacular talent, but I can't see him being a boundary X receiver for the Jaguars. Someone who I can is Johnny Wilson. Also, this team likes using tight ends, and if you ever want to use Johnny Wilson in that mode, you could certainly do that with Brent. I think what's Brenton Strange there. So I'm gonna go Johnny. I have him as my number 5 player in the class. I have him as a generational talent. Can't find someone who's 6'7", 240 very often. Got to see him at high school because he played Calabasas, and he's just a unique specimen. Could be that X wide receiver for you. And then if you keep Calvin Ridley, he's a really good complement to him, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, etc. So overall, good player. And then you can use him actually in line if you ever want to, and just have a crazy mismatch with some tight end or with some linebackers.
Yeah, can't argue with that. I'm probably not as high on Johnny Wilson as you, but you certainly see the
No one
skill
is.
set, the upside. You see the
Yeah.
skill set upside and see what he could be. And getting with the Jaguars, I think makes a lot of sense in terms of how creative Doug Pearson is a play caller, using formations, using personnel, and if there was a place that you could go in the first round, I think it's either here or Kansas City in terms of
Mm,
how he would be used properly in the offense, and I think it makes a lot of
correct.
sense.
Yeah.
All right, Ravens here. I think DB has to be, or corner has to be the pick here. They are desperate for
Mhm.
some or a guy that can play, uh, man coverage that can really handle responsibilities here. To me, it really comes down to two players. Like I mentioned, I like Kamari Lassiter a lot. I like what he's doing at Georgia. But Denzel Bergman is really, really catching my eye, and I feel like he will be more feels like he feels more of what the Ravens would be looking for. So I'm gonna go Denzel Burke here. I think you bring him in and you let him thrive in man coverage and let him do
Mm.
his thing. And I think it's time for them to get a corner, upgrade the position. Look, Marlon Humphrey I think is not at that point where he's one of the elite guys anymore. I think he's starting to come down a little bit, and you got to invest in that position. They invested in safety, obviously. We're getting Marcus Williams a few, uh, free agent classes ago, and then getting Kyle Hamilton, obviously last year. And then, now you got to look at corner and really upgrade that position.
It's a very fair point. Pick number 29 for the Seahawks. I'm trying to justify pairing Emeka back with JSN, and it's not working out very well in my mind, if I'm just gonna be honest. The only other position I think is really, a big position to fill is probably that defensive interior, was like maybe a nose tackle. Um, for example, Chris Jenkins, I think, would be a great addition here just because he's an elite run defender and he does have that pass rush upside. He's very athletic for his 305 frame. Leonard Taylor just brings unbelievable upside as a pass rusher, but the question is, are you trying to engage as just a pure pass rusher with your pick in the first round? And I feel like they've had enough success and focus primarily on their edge rushers being pressure generators, especially with Boye Mafe's emergence, that I'd feel very comfortable taking Chris Jenkins at this point. He's just continued to solidify himself as one of the best run defenders. He was great at 285, added 20 pounds. He's great at 305. Maybe not as efficient as a pass rusher you would be hoping for, but at the end of the day, not every single player is a Swiss Army knife. And sometimes guys are just really good at one thing and they can just be an assistant in some others. And I think that's exactly what Chris Jenkins will do for this defense.
Yeah, absolutely. Dolphins here at 30. Again, look, I just don't think I'm even thinking about tight end until middle of the second round, late second round.
Yeah.
And I look at this roster. Obviously, there's a lot of talent, especially in the receiver room. So I'm not necessarily going to be looking there, but
Yeah.
they are looking for some guys, behind Christian Wilkins, behind Zach
Mm,
Sealer at defensive ends, and I think Leonard Taylor just makes a lot of sense, man. Just makes a lot of sense in that system. Can play really across the defensive line. They haven't played nose tackle in Miami, which is interesting considering his size, but uh, his stats don't do justice for the tape. That's what I'll say,
mm.
especially as a run defender. He's phenomenal with his hands, his ability to knife through offensive lines and cause havoc in the backfield. This is a pure traits pick. It's a guy right in their backyard. I think it
Yeah.
just makes a lot of sense.
Huge fan of that pick. Honestly, if Johnny Wilson were on the board, you could use him as a tight end because he's
Yeah,
also really good at blocking too. That'd be kind of ridiculous. But yeah, no, I love the Leonard Taylor pick. Just get a guy who's homegrown essentially there in Miami, and then just the pure upside of Leonard Taylor when he's going 100%, he might be the best player on the field. So this could be somebody. I have him at I think 17 on my board. Like you could be getting somebody who's worth a top 5 pick if he's in the right situation. Which luckily for the Dolphins, they have enough good players to where you can kind of just place somebody in their right position. It's not as big of a hole as you're not going to be thrown into a nose tackle position out of pure necessity, which is great. Pick number 31. I'm ripping my hair out at the fact that Emeka Ibuka is here. The question is, would the Kansas City Chiefs be open to Emeka Ibuka? Because I feel like even though Emeka might be running 4.45, his skill set slightly overlaps a little too much with Rashi Rice, pony up SMU, for my liking for this to be a realistic pick. Now, deep down inside, I don't give a damn. Love you, Raw, but I'm taking Emeka anyways. I do think, however, in this terms of realism, Malik Neighbors, that deep threat ability, that speed, the after they catch ability, and the fact that they don't really, apart from Tyreek Hill, Kansas City doesn't usually have a pure X receiver. That's essentially Travis Kelce. Malik fits exactly the receiver archetype that I think the Chiefs go for. So for me, it rips my heart out to say this, but I'm going to go Malik Neighbors above Emeka Buka just because I think the fit is just that perfect.
Yeah, it's just really picking your poison there. But yeah, I agree. I think Neighbors just makes a lot of sense for what the Chiefs like to do, and they just need someone that creates after the catch.
Yeah.
Besides Travis Kelsey, they just
Yeah.
need someone that can do that, and he can. He fits that bill. All right, Eagles at 32 here. This one is interesting because uh, you know, following the Eagles over the past year and following kind of what they like to do, what they uh, have trended towards, it's always a pick that doesn't seem like it's a need, right? But I think this one is kind of glaring. They need to tackle the future because they
Mm.
move they s- see they drafted Tyler Steen, but they have him at guard, and he's gonna be at guard. This one, all right. So let me preface this pick. All right, this this is probably not going to be their first round pick, but they like to get guys that they feel like they can mold into starters at some point. And I am looking at a Ivy League prospect here, and I'm taking Kieran, and I don't know how to say his last name yet. I think it's,
No one does.
but I'd like him at pick 32, and I know this pick here is gonna be like, what are you doing? He just had a season-ending injury. I know he was a big player on the Senior Bowl's radar, in terms of what he does. But knowing that the Eagles always scout the four corners of the earth, like they got Jordan Mailata from playing rugby, uh, and this is a very big stretch. But he plays left tackle, but I do think they're looking for the future of right tackle. Probably would have been Tyler Guyton for me, but since he was off the board, I didn't want to go there. And I look at him like Kingsley Su Suamatia, I think is how
Tua
you say his name.
Matea. Yeah, you're good.
He was a guy that I consider as well, but I think the Yale tackle here, Kieran is gonna be my pick here. I watched his tape over the summer and was really impressed with his movement skills, his ability to move in space, create lanes in the running game, and much of the same this year. I think he
Yeah.
was going to be a Senior Bowl guy. He was going to get invited, but I think he had a season-ending injury recently, so I don't know if that's still going to happen. But I believe he's still going to go down to Mobile and do the interviews and do all those things. And ideally, you with this pick, you're looking for that fifth year option. And with Lane Johnson, depending on how long he's going to play, he could play another year, another 2 years. You need some more waiting in the wings. And you could really, Jeff Stalin loves to develop guys that uh, are unheralded, or guys that, just don't really get the recognition, or really didn't catch people's eyes. But uh, I'm going with the logic here in saying this, and this is more the thought process versus the player, but I think he would be the guy that I pick here at 32.
Okay. See, I haven't been able to. Well, there's not very much Yale tape out there in the first place, but it's intriguing. So obviously, I don't know enough to even comment on Kieran here at all. I was like waiting to see if you're gonna go to a Matea or if you're gonna just say screw it. Julio Jones, Olamide Zacchaeus, get the hell out. We got a Mecca Buka on the board. But I love the fact that you gave a unique highlight into a player that probably nobody, including myself, really fully understands as well as you do. So again, that's kind of what It's why you bring people on. Like, it's the best part about it. So, yeah, appreciate you coming on as always, Devin, Philadelphia Inquirer. Feel free to give yourself one more shout out before we kick the people out.
Yeah, real D underscore Jackson on Twitter, or X, I guess you can say now, formerly known as Twitter. But yeah, always, looking to, stay on top of NFL draft prospects, and um, you know, there are names you see, feel free to drop them, and I'd be happy to take a look at them.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Devin, for coming on, and thank all of y'all for being able to support the show and join us on today's episode. You take it easy, friends. Later.